Hello, I am DragonBlitz, and this is going to be a glitchless run of Castlevania Symphony of the Night. This glitchless speedrun has gone through quite a bit of optimization in the last couple of months. Shoutouts to Classic Advent for essentially doing a lot of research on his own and finding some fun little optimizations here. Even more than that will be showcased in this run. There are still more to be had that I haven't been able to implement into my runs quite yet, but I am still working on. But yeah, starting off strong, the beginning of this run is essentially the prologue of the previous game, Rondo of Blood, where he plays Richter. This is kind of an homage to that. We quickly get through the prologue by defeating Dracula, throwing Hydro Storms out there, Holy Waters on the ground. It's the fastest way to get past here and quickly start playing as Alucard, the main meat of the game and the run itself. So the main differences between a run like this and like an any percent run is obviously the major glitches of the run are banned. I say major glitches of the run because there are technically a few minor glitches that are allowed for convenience sake. For example, the prologue, you can kill Dracula slightly faster with a damage stack glitch. It's essentially random whether it happens or not if you do certain actions, so for convenience sake, it's just allowed. And another somewhat random glitch that can happen is called an MP refill glitch. Essentially, it's a glitch that can happen to the player outside of their control. So for the sake of allowing the runs to not just be a reset point if something just randomly happens to you, that glitch is also allowed. It is a very beneficial glitch if it does happen to you, but you can't really control it. So it's kind of like every so often you'll just randomly get some free time save, and it's it can be very impactful depending on where it happens, or sometimes it's not impactful at all. But I'll explain it if it comes up. The other thing that's very different from other speedruns is because it is glitchless, there is no glitchless way to quickly get past death. There is a way to get past death and keep your very powerful starting gear if you use a big toss, which is technically not a glitch, but the state that it puts you in afterwards means that you can't like open your menu and you can soft lock the game if you like fall in a specific way. So it's generally seen as like kind of a glitch and isn't allowed for this run. There's a different run that is very similar to this called No Major Glitches that does allow for that skip to happen. But other than that, they're very, very similar. The outcomes, however, is that we are playing through Symphony of the Night without any of the starting gear, which for pretty much all other versions of Symphony of the Night speedruns, you're going to see Alucard having his famous Alucard sword, his Alucard shield, the Dragon Helm, which lowers enemies' defense, allowing you to do even more damage. The Alucard sword is one of the most powerful weapons just in general, as far as swords go. It slashes very fast, it has a very high base power. The Alucard shield is also very powerful in combination with the shield rod, which is an item that you find pretty early on in the game. If you combine those two items, you essentially have like a walking, just like nuke that can melt any boss or any enemy in the game. But instead, this is a little bit more down-to-earth, grounded combat you're going to be seeing here. Alucard is still very powerful without the overpowered options because Alucard always has access to his spells. Normally, you learn these spells by buying the spell books in the shop, but instead the way the game works is you always had access to those spells. You just have to know how to do the inputs. So Tetra Spirit is a very powerful one. It summons a bunch of spirits, and they lock onto the enemy and do a bunch of damage. The reason I saved the game there, by the way, is for a tiny, not tiny, but an interesting game optimization here. So the way that Symphony of the Night works is there is an area that you need to go to pretty much in every single run, which is the Aurochs' quarters. This gives you access to the Colosseum area, which has the Form of Mist relic, which is an important relic because it allows you to get the Soul of Bat relic, and that's the most important relic in the game. It allows you to do very fast movement, allows you to fly around. It's very, very strong. One of the things that's nice about these types of speedruns here, like the glitchless run here, is that we are doing what is called the Clock Rush. So long as I can make it back to the central clock room, which we're about to see here in just 1 second. Right here. As long as I can make it back here in under 8 minutes, there is no way to save time over that because the game is basically on these global in-game time cycles. So any mistakes that you make in the early parts of the run can technically be mitigated because you're going to be forced to wait for the clock statue to move out of your way anyways. So the early parts of the run are a little bit more laid back for that reason. I go out of my way to pick up the clock sub-weapon, the stopwatch. The stopwatch is very powerful for a couple of reasons. The primary one is the doppelganger boss fight, which is the next boss coming up, is completely ruined by it. Essentially, the doppelganger gets completely frozen by it, and you can just kind of stand there and punch him over and over again. The other thing that's interesting about this run is we actually have to route out our money very specifically, because Symphony of the Night has a money glitch that is very, very powerful in any of the other runs that allow for glitches. But since this run doesn't allow for glitches, we actually have to route in a specific amount of money as quickly as we can. So certain candles are broken open because they have like the $250 bag, for example. And that extra money does go a long way in helping route in specific items once we get to the shop. But before then, we have the next boss fight coming up here. I just needed to refill my health there. And again, it's part of the clock rush, so any time loss here is pretty much mitigated by the fact that we'd have to wait for that clock statue to move anyways. So yeah, with the stopwatch, the doppelganger just stands still and you can just punch him over and over again. The interesting thing about Alucard's punch is it's actually secretly one of the strongest weapons in the game, because I don't know how intended this is. I assume it's intended because the developers, programmed it into the game. But when Alucard throws his fist out there, it can hit twice. Once when the fist is extended and once when the fist is coming back. So if you were close enough to your enemy, you can actually double hit by punching them. And that allows you to kill enemies and bosses way, way, way faster than most casual players would be able to. Here I go for a Soul Steal because it allows me to activate this elevator faster than normal. The elevator's off screen, but the Soul Steal is like a full screen attack that hits multiple times, so it's perfect for that. We do all of this to grab the Soul of Wolf relic. The Soul of Wolf is very useful for a lot of things in this game. It allows you to augment your movement, especially on slopes. You can do these slope jumps here, like you're going to see right now. This gives you extra height if you happen to jump off of a slope. It essentially transfers your horizontal momentum into vertical momentum, which is very cool. It allows us to go out of our way to grab that garnet. That's a sellable gem. Here it's faster to get past these enemies by just jumping over them or using spells to get past them. Spells grant you a brief period of invincibility, which is very important in getting past certain enemies that block your path. And that's completely intended. Giving you iframes after doing spells is not like a glitch or anything like that. That's just how the game works. So here we transform into wolf because certain sections of the game, it's actually faster to move in wolf form, specifically anything involving slopes, so we can do slope jumps, or anything involving somewhat awkward terrain, because Alucard's main movement option, the backdash, and specifically backdash cancels, are very useful when you're on flat ground, but when you're on sloped ground, it sometimes changes the speed of it, as well as if you have to do any sort of like jumping or getting past enemies, it slows it down quite a bit. But yeah, this is the consequence of that clock cycle I was talking about. Here we have to wait for the clock to open anyways. So since we're waiting for the clock to move, we didn't lose any time from any small movement mistakes. But now that the statue is moved out of the way, this is where real-time save and time loss can begin. So this is essentially once the run, this is where the run gets real. Our goal for the run is obviously to beat the game as fast as possible without using glitches, but that requires a few things. We're going to need the Holy Glasses item to enter the second castle, which is where the final boss is. But in order to get that, we're going to need the gold ring and the silver ring. Both of those items are in different parts of the castle and require other specific items as well. The fastest way to move around in the game, generally speaking, is with the Soul of Bat relic. That allows us to transform into a bat, fly around, and do a spell called a Wing Smash, which lets you very, very quickly move around the game. And in order to get that, we're going to need the Form of Mist relic, which is what we are getting right here. Conveniently enough, there's also a library card item right before the boss fight that gives you the Form of Mist. This is the Minotaur and Werewolf boss fight. Here we do some punching on Minotaur. For whatever reason, the enemies stand still for a while. I think the enemy AI is expecting you to wait for a cutscene to finish, because there's normally a cutscene before this boss fight. But if you just skip the cutscene, they just kind of stand there vulnerable for some reason. It's very silly. And then here, you grab that Form of Mist, but we're not quite done yet in the Colosseum because we are going to be finding that item that I talked about earlier, the Shield Rod. Even without the Alucard shield, the Shield Rod is still a very powerful item in general in this game because it essentially allows you to cast spells in combination with whatever shield you currently have equipped. And in the shop is an item called the Iron Shield, which is a very, very powerful shield in combination with the Shield Rod. Here there's a $1,000 bag inside of that candle. That's just free money. So I go ahead and grab that. And I go into the shop, sell all the gems that I have available. Buy the Jewel of Open, which is a relic that allows you to open blue doors, which is very important. We buy a few library cards so we can teleport back to the library later. And we also buy the Iron Shield. So the Iron Shield plus the Shield Rod is going to be our primary way of dealing damage to bosses from here on out. And it's a very unique spell. I'm very excited to talk about it once we showcase it on this next boss, because there's a bunch of different ways that you can use it in interesting ways. It also costs a decent amount of MP, so we have to constantly keep our MP full, which is why you're going to see me stop at save rooms to refill both my HP and my MP whenever it's low. Here I use the stopwatches to freeze these enemies in place so that way they don't cause me any trouble. And then I'm going to cast that Shield Rod spell, do a little bit of extra damage to the Lesser Demon, walk away, because the way that the shield spell works is that it constantly is moving in the direction that you were facing when you cast the spell, and it's these swords that fly across the screen. So if you can pull the camera away from the enemy as the swords pass, you kind of keep the enemy in the hitbox of the swords for even longer, doing even more damage. So this like camera manipulation is the main way that you get the most amount of damage out of the Shield Rod spell. I then collected the Soul of Bat relic, which was locked by a mist gate. I also found some extra money here, so I sell the gems that I had to buy a mana prism. The mana prism itself is a very interesting item. It's a single-use potion that fills your MP all the way to full, and MP is a very, very valuable resource. As you see, my MP bar at the top is constantly going down anytime you see me flying very fast in bat form, and it's the fastest way to move around in the game. So I'm constantly going to be trying to get as much speed out of my MP as possible by doing these wing smashes when I can, as well as like transforming into the bat with momentum. This also gives you a little bit of extra juice out of your MP bar, because the main way that what determines whether you are like a top level glitchless runner versus like someone who's just starting out is actually MP management. So every wing smash costs 8 total MP, and the amount of MP you have is like somewhat random depending on your level ups. Every time you level up, the amount of MP you gain is slightly different. So every single run, you kind of have to adapt to the total amount of MP that you have. You'll have generally the same amount, plus or minus like 5 total MP, depending on your level. And it makes for some very like interesting, like on the fly decision making about what's the best way to use the amount of MP that I have to get the most out of it. And also the important thing, the skill involved in performing the wing smash in and of itself is already very difficult. This is probably the most skill intensive category that we have for that reason, because you constantly have to manage your MP, which is a skill on its own. And you also have to execute very, very well in order to use the MP efficiently. The wing smash spell itself is a complicated input. You have to hold the jump button, do a 3/4 circle motion on the control stick, and then release the jump button. You have to do that many times over the course of the run, and if you want to chain wing smashes together, you have to do them once every second or so. Otherwise, you are ejected from the bat transformation and forced back into Alucard form, which is very slow. So optimally, you are chaining these inputs over and over and over again, whilst controlling the bat's height, because you can control the bat up and down while you're doing wing smashes. Meanwhile, you have to control whether you're doing a 3/4 circle motion or not during that up and down input. So it's very, very skill intensive. Like right there, doing downward wing smashes it looks very simple, but like technically it's very, very complicated. But here I'm just trying to get the most out of my wing smashes. The other thing now is I went out of my way to grab the Leapstone relic. The Leapstone relic allows you to double jump, but it also allows you to dive kick, and then you can transfer that horizontal momentum from the dive kick into a transformation. And the bat transformation retains horizontal momentum, which is very nice. So you can combine the horizontal momentum from the dive kick into the transformation, allowing you to like slide across the screen whilst transforming. It's just a faster way to get going while in bat form. Here you're going to see me go out of my way again for save rooms to refill my MP at critical junctures. The other thing that I'm doing here is lining up the Shield Rod spell such that the swords are on top of the enemy as the swords spawn in, because they immediately have a hitbox. That's another way to gain more DPS out of the Shield Rod spell here with the Iron Shield. The other thing that we're doing here is we're grabbing the silver ring. That is one of the required items here for the glitchless run. However, the game intends that you have the spike breaker item in your inventory in order to break these spikes here. But one of the things you can do is instead of using the spike breakers, you could just use invincibility frames from a potion to just become immune to the spikes. It's not a glitch or any sort of bug abuse or anything like that. That's just the intended mechanic of you are immune to spikes when you use a potion. So this sequence break is possible, and it is also a part of the glitchless category. So from here, we use one of those library cards to get out of that location in the chapel. It's just a faster way to get back to a more central part of the castle, because our next goal is to get the gold ring, now that we have the silver ring acquired. With the silver ring and the gold ring acquired, we'll then be able to get the holy glasses, which gives us access to the second castle, which is where we're going to be finishing the game. But from here, it's going to be more movement that is specifically designed to reserve as much MP as possible, get as much juice out of each wing smash as possible. Because essentially what you want to do is you want to use your MP in a way where you get a bunch of speed out of it, but you also use up all of the MP that you currently have right before refilling it at a save room. That's like the optimal way to play this category. So if I do everything correctly, I'm going to just barely run out of MP before being able to refill it at a save room. Some things you can do is like strategic damage boosts, like I just did there. It allowed me to maintain fast horizontal momentum in bat form with the dive kick into bat transformation tech. And then I immediately untransform with the damage boost. Otherwise, the untransformation itself costs a decent amount of time and is quite a bit slower than just damage boosting. So in order to get that gold ring, we had to enter the caverns here. The caverns were locked by the Jewel of Open. That was one of the items that we bought in the library. So now that we're here in the caverns, we go to this room over here and enter this corrupted-looking save room. But before that, we do go out of our way for the Moonstone. That's an item that increases our stats, because stats do actually matter quite a bit in this run. Just having extra damage helps you save time on bosses, because if you have just barely more damage available with like the Moonstone equipped, for example, it could save you time by doing one less Shield Rod spell. Because every time you do the Shield Rod spell, it freezes the screen for like 3 seconds. So it's obviously a very fast way to kill bosses, but you don't want to do too many of those spells because they both cost MP, which eats into your ability to move fast later, and it also slower because you have to wait for the animation. This is an interesting optimization that has just recently been discovered, which is moving here in wolf form. Doing that wolf movement with those slope jumps, that's a relatively new strat that didn't exist before. Very cool. It also saves a little bit of mana as well, compared to like doing wing smashes and whatnot. So yeah, anything that is both fast and MP efficient is very, very strong for this category. So now that we have both gold ring and silver ring in our inventory, we are moving back to that central clock room where we were making a big fuss about the clock rush. Underneath that room is like a secret area that opens up, and that's where you get the holy glasses item. But you just have to be wearing both rings in order to do that. So as long as you have gold ring and silver ring equipped and you enter this room, this little animation with the clock starts happening. And it usually takes about 30 seconds or so in order to open up the secret trap door and then get the holy glasses. But before we go down there, it's actually faster, real quick, to fly up here. The reason being is that the clock animation is going to happen regardless. So while the floor is opening up, you actually take some of that time that would normally be spent waiting for the floor to open up to fly up and grab the gravity boots there. The gravity boots is a relic that allows you to do very fast vertical jumps. And it's very, very useful for the rest of the run. So taking the 10 seconds it takes to grab it now will definitely be time saved later on in the run. So now we come down here, skip the cutscene with Maria, get the holy glasses. We're going to use yet another library card. This is the last one we're going to use throughout the run. With the holy glasses in our inventory, we are done with the first castle. And we're going to move on to the second castle. Yeah, library cards, very, very useful for essentially just going deep to one spot in the castle and then just leaving very, very quickly. So now that we have the holy glasses, all we have left to do in the first castle is to wear them and then enter the boss fight with Richter in the castle keep. If you defeat Richter in this boss battle, you essentially get the bad ending where Richter is defeated, but Dracula lives on, or whatever the lore is. But by wearing the holy glasses, it reveals that Richter is being controlled by the Dark Priest Shaft. And his mind control is like manifesting as this like green orb. And if you destroy the orb, which is essentially a thing that just has like 10 HP, you just hit it 10 times, and you get to move on. So the way that we do this is actually with the shield rod itself. You just spawn the swords on top of the orb, and it just breaks instantly because the shields are constantly ticking damage on top of it. It's a very fast way to deal with that. Very MP efficient as well. Because the other fast ways that you could deal with the orb is with like a soul steal spell, but that costs 50 MP, where the shield spell is only like 20, I believe, maybe 25. But yeah, now we're here in the second castle. Everything's upside down. So now the win condition is we need to get to the final boss of the run, which is Dracula at the end of the game, and defeat him. We have everything we need to essentially do that, except for there are 5 relics spread throughout the second castle that spawn from different boss fights that we have to collect first before the final boss becomes available, which is locked behind yet another clock opening animation. The first one here being the Darkwing Bat. So if we just stand in this spot right here and do the shield spell, we essentially have the swords flying across the screen as the bat also flies across the screen. Pretty much a perfect setup there. And we grab our first Vlad relic, the Ring of Vlad. We're then going to move on to the left for the a little bit of movement before the next boss fight that drops the next Vlad relic. The thing that is tricky about this part of the run here is that your movement has to be very specific because you're quite a bit under-leveled for this part of the run. But in the process of doing all of this, you have to be careful not to take too much damage. We don't really have any equipment or powerful items to prevent like very powerful attacks from like doing a lot of damage to us. And in fact, there's even like intentional reasons to take damage. But we go out of our way to grab this item here, the Dragon Helm. This just lowers the defense of all enemies and bosses, so we're going to be using that to just kill bosses faster. In the optimal route of the run, you actually do skip that item. It's just ever so slightly faster to skip it and grab a different item instead. But here, you have to be very, very specific with your movement here. One of the things that can kind of like hurt your movement in these sections is every time we want to change our momentum after a wing smash, we want to transform into mist and then quickly transform into bat. If you do so too slowly, what ends up happening is you lose MP because the mist transformation takes a ton of MP right up front unless you're able to cancel it almost immediately. So one of the fast ways to get through this room is to transform into bat, do a wing smash, quickly transform into mist, quickly transform into bat to cancel your momentum. But if you screw it up at all, you lose so much time. That is unfortunately what happened to me in this run here. But I was able to recover relatively quickly, and I used up basically all of my MP as well. So as far as like recoveries goes, it's like the best case scenario here. So here I grab the Tooth of Vlad, the next Vlad relic, and conveniently enough, we are right next to a save room to refill all of our MP. It's one of those things that like you just need to know where those MP refills are. You go out of your way to grab them when you can and use up your MP up to that point the best you can. And we move on to the next part of the run. So yeah, there's just like a ton of skill in like knowing how much MP you currently have, knowing how many wing smashes you're able to do, knowing the fastest way to get the most out of your wing smashes, maintaining momentum the best way that you can, trying to dodge enemies throughout all of that. So every run is ever so slightly different because of the random amount of MP that you have, so you can't guarantee that strategies will work 100% every single time. And you have to know like honestly dozens and dozens of backup strats depending on how much MP you have. Sometimes you'll have more MP than you're used to. So then if you want to get the most out of that MP, you have to route in like, oh, I can do a whole extra wing smash. Like, what's the best spot to do that extra wing smash? What's the best way to get the most out of this MP that I have? It makes for a very dynamic speedrun, which unfortunately, every so often you'll just have like a run that is just like, you just have such a low MP amount due to RNG, because every single time you level up, the amount of MP you gain is slightly random. It's like random within a range. And if you just get a low range over and over and over again, you just don't have enough MP to do like the fast strats. It's very unfortunate. So for like world record level reasons, it's kind of worse. Oh, this is what I was talking about with having lower stats than normal. You actually intentionally take a damage boost there. Sadly, that damage boost, I believe, has been routed out. It's slightly unoptimal. This is using the older route where that damage boost was in the route. It's very, very cool. That damage boost is called a big toss. It only happens if you take more than half of your health in a single hit, so it's quite rare to see happen. Here we're going for another quick fight here. Death has 2 different phases, and optimally you just use 1 shield spell per phase. That was essentially a perfect fight right there. And he drops the Eye of Vlad, so that's 3 Vlads down, 2 remaining. Conveniently enough, Death's boss fight is also right next to one of the castle warps. So this like warp system works as long as you have discovered a warp in the castle, like gone to the warp room. That warp is now available to you from any other warp room. So we use this warp room, which has the snake head, which warps us back to the beginning of the reverse castle keep with the lion head. So we're back to the beginning of the second castle, and then we're going to go the other way now to collect the last 2 Vlad relics and get to the end of the game. And again, just trying to get the most out of that MP bar the best we can. And then we have another save room coming up here. Literally used every last bit of MP before refilling. This is Medusa. She has like a really high defense value, so one of the ways that we get around this is actually by just throwing holy water at her. And doing so is just faster than using the shield spells, and it saves you on MP, which is very nice. And she had the Heart of Vlad, so we grab that, and there's only 1 Vlad relic remaining. Here we're going to see like pretty much all the combinations of different movement options available here, but first we make a quick pit stop to grab the Mana Prism. This Mana Prism is again that potion item that refills our MP to full. Very, very useful at these later parts of the run, because with that Mana Prism we get to use even more MP than we would otherwise, just getting basically not really having to worry about like conserving the mana and just going all out as fast movement as we possibly can. And we see that right here, like the MP bar already is very, very low. And we're just trying to maximize our movement up to the next boss fight here with Akmadon, which is going to be the last fight before entering the last section of the run. Akmadon is also incredibly weak to holy attacks, and holy water is, of course, a holy attack. It also has the fire element, which I guess kind of makes sense. It's leaving like a fire trail on the ground. So he's incredibly weak to holy water, so just throwing holy water at him kills him faster than any shield spell would. So here we grab the last Vlad relic, the Rib of Vlad, and we leave. And now we're going to use that Mana Prism to refill our MP to full and keep moving on through the rest of the run. And we're just a few short rooms away to the very end of the game. Very convenient routing here. But before we do all of that, there's one last Mana Prism to grab right here on the path, which means we can use even more of our mana on movement, which is very nice. It's honestly my favorite part of speedrunning Symphony of the Night is once you have all these different movement options available to you, being able to optimize those movement options. Combine them all together for fun and interesting movement ideas. And especially in a speedrun like this, where you're constantly having to make slight adjustments of your strategies on the fly, depending on how much MP you have. Very, very interesting. So here, because we have all 5 Vlad relics, we just have to sit through yet another clock animation similar to the one to get the Holy Glasses, but this time it'll lead to the very end of the game. And here we take the last couple of steps to the end of the game. I equip that mana prism so I can refill my MP to use with the shield rod spell versus these last two boss fights. We have Shaft, who was controlling Dracula earlier. He's the penultimate boss, and there is a setup to essentially defeat him incredibly quickly. Stand in a particular spot, use the shield spell early, so that way his movement has him eating those swords for quite a while. Very fast fight. And then we have the boss fight with Dracula. Here, depending on if you get critical hits, depending on your strength level, which is another like random stat that can be within a range here, and things like that. The number of spells you do versus Dracula can be, I believe, either 3 shield spells or 4. So ideally, you want to do it in 3. Sometimes you have to do it in 4 because that's just the nature of it. So yeah, you just want to basically use the shield rod spell as quickly and as often as possible, having it go across his hitbox to maximize the amount of damage out of it. Also while dodging his fists coming at you left and right. I think this one ended up being a 5 cast, unfortunately, yeah. But GG's nonetheless. That is the Castlevania Symphony of the Night glitchless run. Time ends on the final hit of Dracula. And there's like a big old flashing screen or whatever. But yeah, GG's. The run is very fun, very interesting, very dynamic. A lot of interesting things can happen. There's a lot of skill expression going on. Plus, you get to see a huge chunk of the run. Not a whole lot of like major glitches that skip large parts of the castle. But there still are a bunch of interesting sequence breaks, which is just the fun part about Symphony of the Night is even glitchless, you can still break the game. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you around. Bye-bye.